Good evening, 49er faithful, and welcome to another episode of Between Two Beards. I'm the first beard, Rob Schuh. That's the second beard, Randon McMahon. Randon, how you doing this fine Wednesday evening? Got the beard oil all applied? I saw in the tweet that that's what was going on a few minutes ago.
If you're not prepped and ready to go with some sweet beard oil, then what are you doing? You're not even
What are you doing?
Part of this show. Everybody should be beard oiled up at this point.
Everybody, whether you have a beard or not, just apply a little beard oil just for good measure. Nick from the Mo is very excited. Let's go. Alan, Eliza coming in at Rob Schuh and Randon. Hello and what's up, everyone? Hope everyone had a great Wednesday. Alan, I'm having a good Wednesday so far, but it's about to get better because I am here with Randon doing this show, and that always lifts me up. So I'm not delaying at all. I'm getting us into these topics, Randon. We had a signing today, but it wasn't a signing by the San Francisco 49ers. It was a signing by the Jacksonville Jaguars of an ex-San Francisco 49er. The departure of Arden Key is here at last. So Arden signed with the Niners last offseason for just over $1 million, 1.045. After he was released by the Raiders, originally a 2018 third-round pick, just had 3 sacks, 3 lonely little sacks in 37 games over his first 3 years in the league. But after the magic of Chris Kosarick, you have a 6.5 sack season. He goes on to sign the 1-year, $7 million deal with the Jaguars. So that leaves the 49ers with out Arden Key. How do you feel about the depth on the defensive line now that Arden Key will not be back, Randon? I'm going to call you Arden from here on out. Randon, Arden, no difference.
Yeah, I'm going to sack the subject, right, so to speak. Dude, Chris Kosarick should put in a clause for like bonus money of what he makes these guys on 1-year deal. Like, oh, so I get 10% of the increase in their salary when they get shipped off.
Right.
He'd be making lots of money with Hyder going from $1 million to $8 million and now Arden Key. We thought that this was a possibility of him cashing in, I mean, especially with, football being a highly injured game. He plays a very aggressive position, a little, $7 million, ain't nothing to squawk at. And so, he went that route, but, I think that it was a high possibility. And I think it was shown by the signing of Hyder that they were kind of expecting this, and maybe the talks weren't going well, and they were far off from the amount that they were hoping to get. And so, I think that it just showed that by the previous signings that they weren't going to bring him back unless he went further and further into like stage 3 of free agency, closer to the draft, and maybe they could have got him for cheap. But the Jaguars decided to pony up the dough, and there you go.
And I think this leaves the 49ers with a fair amount of depth. When I look at the depth chart and I see Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Kevin Givens, Nick Bosa, Kerry Hyder, Hassan Ridgeway, Charles Omenihu, Maurice Hurst, Samson Ebukam, and Jordan Willis, that is 10 right there. That's 10 quality defensive linemen who would qualify as starters throughout most of this league. And I don't think the Niners are done. I think that most likely they add to this at some point in the remainder of the offseason, whether that's through free agency or the draft. But I like the baseline of depth that they have. Would I have been happier if they had brought back Arden Key? Yes, absolutely. I probably would guess that the Niners were a few $1 million less than 7 to try and bring him back. And you could certainly say that there may be one big contract lingering on the books that's preventing the 49ers from addressing that need because it's tied up in Jimmy Garoppolo. I agree with you that the Kerry Hyder re-signing seemed to signal that this might be coming. They were at least bolstering themselves against the possibility that he would sign elsewhere because he was getting interest at that point. Do you see this as a scenario where there's another piece needed where the 49ers continue to invest more? And if so, do you see it more in the remainder of free agency or the draft?
I would say the draft, just because you want to get a guy who's going to be on the roster for the next 4 years. Hopefully it's going to be at a cheap number because the fact that he'll be most likely a 3rd round pick or at 61. And so You know, all these 1-year deals are fine, but you're going to continue having to play this merry-go-round of people leaving because of how well they're going to be playing opposite of Nick Bosa. And so having a guy that's going to be under contract for a little bit, I mean, Ebicom this is his last year. You have a lot of these guys on 1-year deals. And so getting either a defensive end or drafting a D tackle, you know, in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, you know, that could be something to look at and just get a really big 300-pound body to just throw in there and see what they can do. So I think the draft will be there. A lot of these veterans, maybe, like I said, in the 3rd phase, if they're super cheap and nobody's coming knocking on their door, or they end up trading the quarterback named Voldemort in before the draft starts. And so I think that's probably where I would look at it. What about you?
I tend to agree. I think the most likely scenario is that they address this in the draft, and I think they do so by adding another edge rusher. I still think that they use one of their first 3 picks on an edge coming out of the draft because it's so deep. It seems like it would be a big mistake not to grab a cost-controlled edge rusher in a historically deep edge rushing class. That just feels like an oversight if you're the San Francisco 49ers not to make that happen. I also do wonder, one of the key dates that I came across today, I believe is May 10th. And that's the closing of the window where signing of free agents counts against the compensatory draft pick formula. So after that date, I think some of these veterans that you see lingering out there in free agency will start to get signed because it won't count against teams in their compensatory draft pick formula. Basically, the NFL says these guys have been sitting around long enough that clearly, you know, they weren't desired in that way. And so it shouldn't count against players that you've lost in that offseason. So I could see the 49ers adding in a veteran. You know, I saw that there was mention from Nick Money Meyer, Calais Campbell still being out there. Could be had relatively cheap. I do think there are some names to keep an eye on, but it will be about value for the San Francisco 49ers, and I think it's about patience, waiting until other teams pass. The next key that I wanted to bring up here is something Ray touches on with his comment. Arden Key will not have an impact on the Jags. He will realize what he had with the Niners. The next question I wanted to bring up is, was this a mistake by Arden Key? Clearly, he's going to make $7 million this year, right? He's getting paid, but it's a 1-year deal. What if he drops back off in Jacksonville? What happens after that? What would have been the case if he had signed on for one year deal with Chris Kosarick and the San Francisco 49ers and had then earned himself a significantly bigger deal? Do you see this as a tactical mistake by Arden Key, or would you have taken the guaranteed money as well?
I think if he gets injured, I mean, there you go. That's could be. What if it's an injury enough to where it's the rest of his career, or, you know, you take the money there? And let's not forget that the Jags have a very high pick. If they decided to go edge with the guy out of Michigan, I believe Hutchinson, or something like that, we all saw what Nick Bosa did in his rookie year and how he made the rest of the defensive line better. And so, you know, having a high-end edge rusher on the other side could, you know, they could have a decent pass rush and his stats wouldn't go down and he could still earn that money. You know, having a successful season on the Jags, they're most likely going to be pretty much another bottom feeder team, but you're looking at, you know, a situation where if they get an edge rusher, then he could have another young guy across from there, make an equal amount of impact, because maybe he'll get more snaps on the Jags than he would have gotten on the Niners because of all the different edge rushers they have. And so if he's playing more and they have a decent pass rusher that they draft in within the draft, whether it be that top pick or the first pick of the second round, you know, you're looking at possibly getting another good contract. It's going to be based on his efforts anyways. And so maybe that's was something that he looked at.
I think you're onto something there. The percentage of snaps that he could get while he's there with the Jags may present him with a bigger opportunity. I saw it the other way. I thought of it as a mistake for Arden Key in that, right, he takes the $7 million deal, but I bet that the Niners would have brought him back somewhere around $4 or maybe $5 million. Mark came in here with the comment saying, would you have been mad if we gave him a deal where it was 1 year, $5 million? No, 1 year, $5 million would have felt about right to me. So he would have coughed up $2 million in that deal if he had done it. But I honestly think that it's foolhardy to think he wouldn't have made that up with another good season. You bring up a great point of there's definitely the risk of injury, and that's something only Arden Key can assess for himself, and whether that $7 million is worth it. A bird in the hand versus two in the bush. But, choosing to lock down the cash, I can't necessarily blame him. But you would think if he had come back, had another 7-sack season, he would have earned himself a 3-year deal with a ton more guaranteed. So to me, if I'm Arden Key, I may have risked it a little bit and come back, especially when he described the brotherhood in that defensive line unit.
I wonder if his agent could have lobbied for an incentive-laden contract. So a base amount of, like 3 or 4 million. And then if he gets over a certain amount of sack totals on the season, it can, go upwards of 7 or upwards of 8. I don't know if incentives count towards the cap or if they count as
only if they're likely to be earned incentives. And you'd have to get into the actual language of that to understand what's likely to be earned versus not likely to be earned. But that's the technical term.
Yeah. So, Arden Key getting 30 sacks incentive is not really likely to be earned, but,
right.
10 would be somewhere, to where that could be something that that he could have gotten, if he played a lot of those snaps. But I think that he tried to cash in. He's going to be the focal point of that Jags pass rush with whoever they draft in the first or second round, because I have a feeling they are going to try to go edge. I think they probably will go trenches with both their first 2 picks, whether it be tackle and edge or edge tackle in either one of those orders. But it'll be interesting. I mean, he's going to be the guy over there.
Yes, he is. Leaving agrees with you that the path to playing time is not guaranteed with the Niners, whereas that is most likely the case with the Jags, locking down one of those spots. Ellis 10 bringing in an interesting question to close out this topic. I'm reading that the 2022 49ers D-line will be better than 2021. Rob, do you agree with this? I'll start first on this one and say that seems to me to be a bold assertion right now. Once the 49ers go through the remainder of free agency, if they add another depth piece, certainly if they invest one of their first 3 picks within the draft at edge rusher, I'll give it some further thought. But as I look at it right now, in trading out DJ Jones for hopefully healthy Javon Kinlaw, but a bit of an unknown at this point, and then in losing Arden Key, but gaining Kerry Hyder, I'm hard pressed to say that this is a more effective defensive line. I mean, we had D Ford for a handful of snaps last season, contributed 3 sacks. We aren't going to have those. Take Arden Keys off of the board. You've got to hope if you're counting on it being better. I think the assertion has to be that you're going to get some continuation in growth from Omenihu and Samson Ebukam. But without that, it seems like a stretch to me.
Yeah, I'm going to sprinkle some fairy dust on this and see if I can maybe lift your spirits here. So Kinlaw saying that he's in the best shape of his life. I don't know. A lot of people say that, but you got to take it for what it's worth. He's in the best shape of his life. 2, Armstead moving continuously to the inside. We saw that his production was a lot better. And so maybe that'll be something that helps their pass rush continue to grow. Ebukam got better as the season went on. Omenihu seems like a steal. And they all came on towards the end of the season. And here's another thing. The symbiotic relationship with the secondary. The corners look a whole lot better this season. I will wait until the secondary as a whole with that safety position still vacant.
Undecided.
But overall, the corners look a lot better. And so if they're locking up these wide receivers, giving the pass rush more time, you could see elevated stats for the pass rush this next season. And so I'm saying, yeah, it has the potential to be better. Only time will tell.
I like it. Hey, you're selling me on it. I like being pulled in a positive direction. And yes, Randon, I mean, just speaking for myself, I'm in the best shape of my life right now. That's just, that's where I'm at. Me and Javon, best shape of our lives. Absolutely.
Dude, working out every day. I like it.
Like a beast. All right, let's transition topics. Before we do, I got to take care of business. You know how it is. If you enjoy the content, please hit the like button down below. Help Randon and I expand our reach and subscribe to the channel. Also, down below in the description is the information to give Randon a follow over on Twitter, over on YouTube. He's got a dope show over there, Cerberus Sports, going on. Make sure that you follow it. Again, the link is down in the description, and he's got content coming out on the regular. Let's talk a little bit
do it.
about John Lynch's comments at the owners' meeting, Randon. This, to me, was potentially his most truthful hint at his hope of trading Jimmy Garoppolo. Let me give you this quote, and then we can respond. Obviously, there are a lot of questions. Well, what does this mean for Trey? The great news is that we're extremely positive, as I've said, as Kyle said, on Trey's progress. This offseason, he'll have ample opportunity. Jimmy won't be ready until training camp, and Trey will have ample opportunity, as well as Nate, to get plenty of reps, and we're looking forward to that process. We hold on to Garoppolo because we know what he can do. We know what he means to us, and that's not to say that talks won't pick up again. So do you view this? Does trading Jimmy really remain a viable possibility, or is the front office just being stubborn at this point and should pivot to some other solution?
I think they're gambling here. They're hoping that somebody gets injured in training camp. They're hoping that the team gets thirsty for a quarterback, and hey, we got the only one available on the market.
Right.
Pay a premium price. And so, I think it is what it is. I think it's Trey's job. I mean, you're looking at, they can't come out and say it because that deflates whatever they perceive Jimmy's trade value to be. But he's practicing with Ayuk. He's practicing with Sudfeld. And so he's getting a lot of work in there in the offseason. I think he'll get the most work in with all the ones, every single part of OTAs and training camp and other mini camps and all this kind of camp. He'll have every single opportunity to do it there. And so I think that it's just a little bit of coach speak and a little bit of honesty in the fact that, they're waiting to hold on and they're hoping that a team has a problem behind center and they can fill that need.
The fans are pretty much unanimous in wanting to get rid of Jimmy as soon as possible. There's a small contingent of fans that still believe, hey, you hold on to him and you try and maximize that value. I think to me, it's a little bit of both. That you are looking at a viable possibility of trading him, but viable maybe an overly positive term there. It may be a very, very small window in trading Jimmy Garoppolo, but you're being prudently stubborn at this point because as of right now, unless there is a free agent that the 49ers have their heart set on that they would be unable to sign through means of moving around money in other contracts, meaning that they need Jimmy's contract free from the books in order to actually sign that player, then they're not really missing out on anything. It's frustrating for those of us following along. I would rather that this would be over. I think that the mental anguish is something to be considered when you're talking about the locker room, when you're talking about John Lynch. I see exhaustion on John Lynch's face. I saw exhaustion and a pretty huge hangover on Kyle Shanahan's face in those videos, right? Those red puffy eyes are a dead giveaway. And you might think that he's hitting the sauce a little bit hard because he's dealing with this stress of the Jimmy Garoppolo trade fiasco and how that has unfolded. So to me, I do think they're being a little bit stubborn, but I do think there's a ray of hope. And while there is that ray of hope, they might as well hold on to Jimmy as we get closer to actually practicing, as we get closer to week 1. I think they'll have to reconsider. But for right now, it seems like a reasonable strategy to me.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to hold fast on it. It is what it is. I mean, I wonder what maybe your thought process is. Obviously everybody wants to cut him or whatever. Where would you feel that the pick in return wouldn't be worth the money? How do I put this? So like if it's a second, then holding on to him. But if the market right now is a 5th, do you think that'd be worth holding on to him, or should we just cut him at that point? Like where's that value to where it's worth it for you to hold on and maybe eat some of that cash?
I think if we're talking about eating some of that cash, it's got to be something like a 4th or a 3rd to me. If you get into eating up salary cap just to get that pick, now you need that pick to be reasonably high because you need that to be a cost-controlled player that's a quality cost-controlled player in order to justify having given up money to acquire the draft pick you use to select that player. I think when it comes to what is it worth just to get a pick back, the other question that has to be answered for me is, do the 49ers have their targets on any free agents? And if not, if, regardless of what they did with Jimmy's contract, they would be sitting here doing nothing in free agency, then to me, it doesn't matter what that draft pick is. If you're shooting for a 6th rounder, great. But if it's hindering you from grabbing a free agent, from signing a free agent that you covet, if it's stopping you from getting deals done, to me, it better be something like a 4th or a 5th that you're after in order to even begin to justify that. I think that the Niners were conservative in their approach to free agency, so I don't anticipate they have their eyes on that many available free agents at this moment. I don't think that there's anyone out there that they would have signed necessarily if they had gotten Jimmy off the books, but I can't know that for sure without getting that inside info.
Yeah, I think that they're probably waiting till the draft and see which players they get and how their roster looks after the draft. I don't know when this date is, and maybe we can look it up for another show, but there's a point in where if they cut him, they have an opportunity to roll over the vacated salary until next season. And so I wonder when that would be, because that would make sense for me. Like, I'd rather get no pick and roll over that $25 million over till next season. And then Trey is 1 more year experience. We have $25 more million on the books, to play with after this season. So I wonder when that date is and see if they can kind of make that move beforehand to kind of save some of that money and transfer it over to the 2023 season.
That makes sense to me. And my guess would be the Niners are all over some of these dates and maneuvers that give them flexibility. That would make sense if it gives them some advantage. Right now, I don't see any lines in the sand other than week 1, where his salary becomes fully guaranteed, that really force the Niners into these moves. Getting to a couple of questions related to this topic. Ellis10, sneakerhead here on the channel, says, I love that Jed York mentioned that he will stay out of the way in regard to John and Kyle's decision at quarterback. I did too. I found that to be refreshing. I think that Jed's a better businessman than he is an NFL mind. And so I'm glad when he recuses himself from these decisions.
Yeah, I mean, that's what an owner needs to be silent and strong. They need to do whatever they need to do to get the team to win. So writing a bunch of checks and make sure that the fan experience is great. And that's it. Like, they hire the right people.
Get focused on the Levi's fan experience, because that's not quite where it needs to be. So I applaud you for not inserting yourself here, but get cracking on that. Give me some shade in those East stands, damn it. James Schaefer coming in. Do you guys feel that Kyle and John see actual value in Jimmy improving Trey as QB1? So does Jimmy offer that mentor role? My guess is no. My guess is anything he had to offer probably rubbed off last season. I think it's more of a detriment to the health of the quarterback room than it is a positive in my book at this point.
They brought in 2 quarterback coaches to do just that. They don't need Jimmy to do that. I mean, Greasy has more, just as much experience in football, if not more, than Jimmy G. And so, he can mentor him mentally and get him ready to play games. They don't need Jimmy Garoppolo for that.
I tend to agree there. Just a dude, man. Sneakerhead says, I am of the mind that it sucks to pay Jimmy all that money, but he is a chip to use when someone is desperate for a signal caller. Also, if Trey goes down, we can win with him. There's something to this in just keeping him right now, where you're hopefully not giving up anything by keeping him. Hopefully you're not missing out on any free agents, because the Niners just are acting conservatively and wouldn't sign those free agents even if they did move Jimmy. And then it gives this flexibility that Just a Dude is talking about, which is if some other quarterback goes down, if another team gets desperate, if something happens to our quarterback, it provides some options. So I think I can put up with the price of my sanity of keeping Jimmy for a couple of months to get these added benefits.
Yeah, and I'm going to be a little negative Nancy here. What if it goes the other direction and they keep him on the books? His salary is 100% guaranteed. Trey balls out all year long. They don't even need Jimmy, and they just paid him $27 million to hold a clipboard because they were trying to get picks for him. I mean, that's a possibility if they go down this route as well. That
really is, and that would hurt. That would really hurt. As would allowing Jimmy to practice and getting him injured and then having him on the shelf for an entire year and paying his salary. Randall Riley doing the good work. Smash that like button, please. Yes, indeed. Alan asking, has the Honey Badger signed anywhere yet? Not that I'm aware of. I did see reports of him looking to sign with some team, but it's escaping my mind which team that was at the moment. So I don't want to misquote it. People are fired up. LS10 is fired up about the shade comment in Levi's Stadium. Bring in the shade. Bring in the shade. All right. Jerome M gets to this super chat before we transfer to the next topic here, Randon. Off topic. Schefter reporting per Peter King that Bruce Arians is retiring and moving to the front office. No wonder Brady came back. That's an interesting one, man. I don't know what to make of everything happening there in Tampa Bay, whether it's all smoke and no flames or whether there's something brewing there. But the weirdness of Brady retiring and coming back in 40 days, the rumors that came out of animosity between he and Byron Leftwich and Bruce Arians around coming together, and Bruce Arians shooting down some of the ideas of his coordinator and star quarterback. And then this as well. Plus the rumor of Brady to Miami out of nowhere. It seems like a lot of smoke. The one thing I gather from it is that it's not paradise there in Tampa Bay. There are some bumps in the road.
It seems like it, but I mean, it would be a rather shady thing for Bruce Arians to retire right now and not allow the Buccaneers to have had a good chance to go find a head coach, have a game plan for this upcoming season, and et cetera, et cetera. So that'd be interesting to see if it'll be a locker room dumpster fire situation for Brady's last year in the NFL.
It is an interesting storyline to follow. And as long as it contains Tom Brady and there's any chance of him deciding he wants to move teams, San Francisco 49ers fans are going to be tuning into that. It is crazy. People reacting. Joseph 559. Bruce Arians just retired. What the frick? Yes, it is crazy. Look at that. Randall Riley already with the speculation. Sean Payton to Tampa Bay if rumors of Arians retires are correct. That is interesting. All right. Nick Money Meyer comes in with the super chat. If Lynch crapped the bed with Jimmy, is he out? Does he head to the booth? This is an interesting one. If Jimmy Garoppolo stays on the books, does it at any time reflect poorly enough on John Lynch to where he loses his position within the 49ers? Randon, what say you, sir?
No. I mean, Jed York just said, he's like, I'm going to let them make the decision and they're going to do that decision. I mean, so I think his job is pretty secure there.
I do too. I get the sense from Jed York's comments that he's not overly stressed by this. He understands it was a moving target. And so, no, I don't think that that's enough. But a couple of other missteps, and this will become a step along the road that led to that firing. So I think this is a strike against him. I just don't know that there are enough strikes existing to strike out at this point. So let's transition from John Lynch over to Kyle Shanahan.
They said Todd Bowles was picked to replace him.
Ooh, nice. Okay, so Bruce Arians retires. Todd Bowles stepping in as the head coach. Breaking news. Breaking news heard here first, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so this is Kyle Shanahan in speaking specifically about the dynamic of Jimmy and Trey and talking about trading Jimmy. So here's the quote. That's why we looked into trading Jimmy, Shanahan said to the media on Tuesday. We obviously believe that Trey can be a starter, and we're ready to do that. But we're not just going to get rid of a good quarterback because we have other quarterbacks on the roster. Quarterbacks are really hard to come by, and some teams don't have any at all. The fact that we have 3 that we're happy with is a good thing. Jimmy's done a great job for us. We brought Trey here to be that eventually. And I think that'll be sooner rather than later. But when Jimmy gets a surgery, we can't upgrade our team by getting some good picks until people feel good about that. I'm all right with that. We're not just getting rid of him to get rid of him. Jimmy's a good player that we all really like as a person and as a teammate, and we're going to wait to see whatever helps the Niners the most. So do you believe at this point in time, when you balance out the stress on the organization versus what Shanahan is saying here, is he correct that Jimmy's still an asset worth holding on to at this point in time?
They believe so. They believe eventually somebody's going to come knocking. And that's what they're saying. Oh, well, nobody traded for him because he wasn't going to be ready for camp. You know, his injury, they want to see, if his thumb's going to be right, if his shoulder's going to be all right. They want to see him throw in person, all this yada, yada, yada stuff. But, we'll see how that goes. I have a feeling in order to trade him, they're going to have to eat some of that salary, probably, I don't know, 7 to 10 million and have the team only take on, the other 17 to get a pick. But that would be worth it. It'd be saving some money and you get a pick in return. And that 17 million can also be used to next season, or it could be at the trade deadline where they can trade some assets and get an acquisition that puts them over the top. And so, both are possible there, but it seems like they're doubling down and saying, hey, like we think Jimmy G is a premium asset. We think that a team will come calling and we're going to get the asking price that we thought we could get for him.
I think you're spot on with that, Randon. And I have to agree with Shanahan that he's an asset for right now. For right now, he's an asset because, as I said earlier, I don't believe the Niners would be aggressive with that money if they got it off the books. I think they would still continue to be conservative. And so it doesn't hurt to keep Jimmy for a little bit longer. But when I say a little bit, I do mean that at some point, he no longer is an asset. At some point, I believe he becomes a cost on their balance sheet. At some point, you're preventing the right dynamic from taking hold, and you're probably not going to actually get anything in return for Jimmy. So I can't have him practicing and potentially getting injured. I don't want him on the team week 1 and guaranteeing that salary. So for right now, I agree with Shanahan. There's no advantage to just cutting him for the sake of cutting him other than our sanity. But I think there is a hard deadline approaching toward the end of the summer. Thankfully, Jimmy will be healthy by then. And I think we'll know if he has any value or not.
There'll be some hypotheticals. I mean, you could, like, the Steelers went with the cheaper route of Mitch Trubisky. But what if they get to camp and he's garbage? And they have the other two guys, Haskins and Randolph there as well. And their whole QB room is garbage. Okay, you trade Jimmy Garoppolo for Mitch Trubisky and some picks. And then now Mitch Trubisky's a backup for us. They have a starter and they're still a playoff team. And so, I mean, I don't care if they trade him to Seattle. That wouldn't be like Drew Lock is not anything to he's an actual backup in this league. And so, what if they have a feeling there and they want to go that route and then we take Drew Lock? It wouldn't be that much of a discount. I mean, Carolina, they're on the verge of needing a winning season or that whole
big time.
They're making some changes within the organization. And so, there's plenty of dance partners that could be available come training camp time when a lot of this dust settles. And so I think they're kind of hoping for that. And then as well as the injury bug, maybe striking a playoff team that will need somebody to come knocking.
That's bad when you're hoping for an injury elsewhere in the league to open up a window for you to trade that asset.
Yeah, I feel sorry for that player, whoever he is.
Right?
But when Niners fans jump all over him, like, thank you so-and-so for blowing out your knee and taking Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, Niners fans rejoice.
There are all these Niner fans secretly hoping for someone to have a catastrophic injury, and that's terrible on some level. Yeah. So I am not counting myself amongst it, although I will be glad if there becomes a spot open for Jimmy to go. Chris Royal coming in, Sneakerhead, says he's for sure an asset, but also a distraction. That's the balancing act for me, is that you have to decide at what point in time does it, because it's a distraction right now. I think to me that is clear as day. It was a distraction throughout the season. Last year, it was one that Shanahan nearly lost it multiple times when asked about, well, why isn't Trey Lance starting? He was like, how dare you question what starting quarterback? You traded all those assets for a freaking quarterback. Of course you're going to get questions about it. So yes, it is a distraction. They just got to find that line in the sand of when it crosses from to become more of a distraction than it is a potential asset in getting rid of them.
It's definitely a headache for me to talk about it on Twitter all the time.
Isn't it, though? Lee Ving pointing out he's a distressed asset at this point. I like that. That is good. All right, that Niner guy coming in, Rob Schuh. I get Kyle's logic, but what is the destination? The only real place is Carolina, and when there is only one dance partner and it won't drive up the value. And when there is only one dance partner, it won't drive up the value. No, I think what you're looking at there, that Niner guy, is what Randon's talking about, that they're hoping someone else gets a little bit desperate and decides that they need a freaking quarterback. Darren coming in to say, Rob, Jimmy just got hurt listening to this. I hope that's not the case. We need him to pass a physical. We need him to pass a freaking physical. All right. I am just checking in the comments to make sure I'm not missing anything there. I like all the excitement around Arians, but here are a couple more things that Shanahan said at that owners meeting. Again, in between trying to choke down that hangover that he was clearly suffering from at that table. On trying to trade Jimmy, he says, we obviously believe Trey can be a starter, and we're ready to do that, period. In investing so much to select Lance, we brought Trey here to be the starter eventually, Shanahan said, and I think that will be sooner rather than later. To me, I interpret these to be much clearer comments than we got from John Lynch the day prior that really do say without saying, Trey's the starter. We're moving forward with Trey. No, I can't tell you that straight up because we're still trying to trade Jimmy, but I'm going to tell you about as close to Trey's a starter and we're trading Jimmy. To me, that's about as close as you can expect to get while he dances around this idea that they haven't gotten rid of Jimmy yet. Would you agree with that, Randon?
That's about as honest you're going to get from Kyle Shanahan. I mean, and so I think it is. And like we said last week, that behind closed doors, you don't know what they're saying. He could be like, Trey, you're the starter. We all know it. Go down and take care of your business this offseason. Become ready to play. And, we just have to keep up the charade in public until the situation levels out. But, you are the guy this season. We're moving forward with you. And that could all be behind closed doors until they figure out Jimmy G's situation. And then it'll be like, oh, yeah, we traded Jimmy G and we're completely happy with Trey and he's going to be a beast. And we can't wait for the season. And all the hype videos will come out from the Niners and everything like that. So right now, I mean, we don't know what's behind closed doors, but I have a feeling that's something along those lines. And this comment kind of reflects that.
I tend to agree. I think that I am sure those assurances have been given to Trey. He slipped up as much when he was giving his exit interview to the media in saying, maybe it wasn't the media. I think that was with Rich Eisen or one of the national guys, where he said, yes, I've kind of been told I expect to be the starter. And then he said, well, that's just my expectation. He sort of walked it back. But I thought that was a Freudian slip. I do think he's probably been told that. And this is as close as you're going to get to Shanahan confirming it. All right, let's move on from the quarterback topic, at least for a moment, because Shanahan did talk about a couple of other players. He did mention specifically Aaron Banks and Jauan Jennings. And I want to interpret the statements around Aaron Banks because I thought it was a pretty heavy indication of the 49ers' intention to roll with Aaron Banks starting at left guard. Here's what Shanahan had to say. The way Aaron Banks finished last year, he was ready to go, Shanahan said at the NFL owners meetings, and we almost made a move and put him in. But we kind of went on a win streak, and we were just gelling good as a team. If you had asked me halfway through the season if he was going to be playing, I would have said yes. And things just started clicking for our team, and we didn't want to mess it up. But he's ready to go. Do you interpret those comments to mean that Banks is, in fact, a favorite for one of the open guard spots?
Yeah, based on that, I would. And we kind of said this with the quarterback situation last year as well. If they don't go on that massive win streak, it's probably Trey Lance's team week 6, 7, or 8.
Right.
And so the same thing can be said for other players. If the offensive line, which I don't know at which point in the season this started to click, but they were a top 5 in both run blocking and pass blocking, according to PFF, towards the end of the season. And so they were gelling quite well at that point. The playoffs got a little bit harder with the injuries to Silverback there. But overall, the offensive line, the key players stepped up when they needed to. They were a decent team. They allowed a rookie running back to run for, I think, what he had 900 yards or 800 yards, something like that. And so I think they did play well. And so to throw that cohesion out of whack for a guy not really making that much money, and it wasn't necessary to put him in, makes sense. And then he's the guy this year, and hopefully he takes that second year leap that we all hope, because if he doesn't, then we look a little thin across the offensive line, and you don't want to be a skinny offensive line.
No, you don't. And the Niners, even with Banks, are basically relying on a lot of depth to make the step up to solidify that offensive line. I think you're right that Shanahan has shown repeatedly that he's going to kind of ride that hot hand when momentum is in his favor. So I believe exactly as we stated in that earlier conversation, that yes, it could have happened where we transitioned from Jimmy to Trey earlier. If one or two games had not gone the Niners' way, if they had not turned around the season when they did, they were very close to pulling the trigger there. So it's easy to believe that that's the case for other players as well. You see it in the NFC Championship game. He started to roll with Trent Williams. By the time you realize that Trent really was beaten up and that he wasn't himself out there, he said to Coach Shanahan said to himself, I'm leaving him out there. We rolled with him this far. He may be hobbled to this point, but I'm not going to pull him out when the game is close, the game is on the line, and he has poured his heart out to this point in the season. And I think I respect that. Like, I respect that decision to stick with the momentum and to ride the hot hand. It makes sense to me.
I mean, 70% Trent Williams is better than Jalen Moore.
Right.
So I mean, I don't have a problem with that. But you hope a second round pick makes that jump and is a legit starter in this league. And so, we talked about how maybe they reached up for him with Creed Humphrey and other people there. We've talked about in this draft going out and getting your guy Cole Strange to help having a backup there that can be moved into a starting role going forward. And so hopefully he can, because if McGlinchey is bad and Brunskill is still the turnstile that he is and Bank doesn't take that leap forward, you're going to see a lot of after the plays from Trey Lance, which the fans, say they love, but they won't love if he's getting sacked 40 times a year.
No, they will not. They will quickly be up in arms. Syard coming in with the super chat. Going to get to that before the final topic on Jauan Jennings by Kyle Shanahan talking about, whoops, we got the wrong comment. Syard, there we go. Who else is hyped for a hopefully healthy Kinlaw? Dude, I watched that interview on Brad Graham's channel, the SF Niners. Brad's a great dude, and that was a phenomenal interview with Kinlaw. I loved how open he was, how real he was, how raw he was in that interview. And I got to admit, it has me fired up. I'm going to hold off on expectations, but it got my hopes up. And I do think that we have not truly seen Javon Kinlaw unlocked. If this surgery is successful in the way he anticipates it was, in the way that the team is spinning it, I will be excited to see what he can do in that position.
It's going to be this is the year that he has to prove it, because going into next season, the Niners will have to see about picking up his 5th-year option. And so if he has a down year, I don't foresee that happening. So this is a huge year for him to make guaranteed money come his 5th-year option. And being at pick 13, that's quite a bit of dough that he's going to be earning this season by his play. And a lot of people don't really think about the 5th-year option. Oh, it's only the 3rd season, but they have to make that choice before next year's draft, whether they're going to keep him or not. And then he has to play a full season after that. So, technically his money's being earned this season and he has a lot on the line. And so hopefully that brings out the best in him.
Agreed. That money motivation is always powerful motivation. Sean from 808 just wanted to get to this one for any of those that are just tuning in. At Rob, did you hear Bruce Arians retired from head coaching, moving into the front office? We did announce that earlier. Bruce Arians has retired from Tampa Bay, is moving into the front office, and it is Todd Bowles stepping in as the head coach to fill that vacancy. Did get to that earlier, but wanted to reiterate it as well. Hell, though, if you are hearing this for the first time, that means you haven't heard me say, like that video, smash that like button. All right, let's close this out on Kyle Shanahan's thoughts on Jauan Jennings before we move on to talking about the owner, Jed York. This is what Kyle had to say about Jauan Jennings. I don't think we're working on it yet, but this is in regards to an extension for Jauan. I don't think we're working on it yet, but I'm real happy with Jauan, and I hope that we can keep him here, Shanahan said. I thought he came on real hard last year. Halfway through the season, finished strong. What he did in the playoffs for us. Jauan's got to come in right where he left off and keep getting better. It took him a little bit getting into last year, especially starting out with COVID and missing some of training camp. But Jauan's got a skill set that we like. And the way that he plays, the style that he plays with, we really like. I'm excited about Jauan. When talking about what stands out specifically to Shanahan about Jauan, he says just how aggressive he is, that the game's not too big for him, that he wants the ball, he believes he's the best, and he's trying to prove it on every play. When I listen to that first part, when I talk about, when I hear Shanahan talk about, he was great, especially from the middle of the season on, right? He started out slowly, didn't come in right away in sort of the position that we wanted him, but really came on strong. I sort of get the sense that Shanahan may be sending a little bit of a signal to Jauan about his readiness coming into camp and really laying it out there like, hey, Jauan, you want to come earn this multi-year deal? You've got to come in and pick up exactly where you left off and not regress at all.
I don't think the deal is going to be with the Niners.
Ooh, you think Jauan heads elsewhere?
I think we're going to get Kendrick Bourne again because Bourne ultimatum, if you will, and because Ayuk, right? This is also his third season, so the fifth-year option is still prevalent for him. It's very hard to keep two $20 million wide receivers. If Ayuk goes for 1,200 and say 9 or 10 touchdowns this year, then you're in a quandary with who do you pay because you have Kittle making good money. And so either you keep both of them and then you have nothing but rookie wide receivers as your 3, 4, 5, or these guys making $1 million each. But it's going to be hard to give Jennings an extension and then also keep Ayuk. And so does Ayuk go in a deal? Do you try to keep two really high paid wide receivers and then just have scraps for 3 through 6? It's going to be a decision that they're going to have to make. And so ultimately, I think they're going to get outbid. If he has another 600, 700 yard season with 5 or 6 touchdowns and he's a great run blocker, we're going to get outbid for him. And it's just going to have to, hopefully they find a guy, his replacement in the draft this year that can step into that role. And often, like they do with running backs, where they're going to have to cycle in wide receivers if they decide to pay both Ayuk and Deebo.
And I honestly hope that they continue to work with him throughout this offseason in the hopes of turning that 1-year tender into a multiple-year deal. Because I agree with you. I think if they wait until next offseason, you've got other teams coming in to bid, and then you're most likely in a scenario where you're not going to be able to bring him back, just like you did with KB, Kendrick Bourne. All right, let's transition to the owner. Let's talk a little bit about Mr. York. Mr. York and his comments at the owner's meeting. It was his meeting. So here's what he said about carrying both quarterbacks. I'm not the coach, York said. I'm not the general manager. They have my authority to put the roster together as they see fit. If we think it's the best decision to have two guys that we think are very, very capable of winning football games and giving us a chance to win the Super Bowl, there's no position that's more important in all of sports. So if we're going to overinvest in something, I'd rather overinvest in the quarterback position than anything else. What's your biggest takeaway from Jed's comments here? Do you draw anything specific from what he's saying about the freedom he gives to his head coach and general manager, especially when it comes to the quarterback position?
No, he's pretty much saying, I hired these guys to do a job. I'm going to let them do that job. And it's not really my say to decide what's going on there, yes. Which is true. You get some owners that are too involved and have so much presence, and that could be a locker room distraction, right? And that could be a distraction for a GM or a head coach having to constantly look over your shoulder up in the press box to see if your owner is happy or sad, and all those things. And so, I think you're looking at a situation where he probably does have an opinion, but he hired these guys to do a job. They gave him extensions, and so they're going to let them. The trust has been there. The trust has been there to go and trade 3 firsts to go get Trey. The trust has been there to extend Jimmy on his deal after just 5 games, and so he's continued to trust the situation. And I'm sure that he's had talks with Lynch about what their game plan is, and even if he's not 100% okay with it, I mean, you can't just pull the reins back right now and
right.
Start after giving them all this, this room to go for the last, several years. And so I think it's just that's what he's pretty much saying. Like, that's not my job. That's not my job to make those decisions.
Yeah, I find relief in it because I agree that an owner should allow that. He hired those individuals. He needs to trust those individuals, and then he can assess their job at the end and let them go if he doesn't believe they're doing an adequate job. But to step in the middle would be a catastrophe. If Jed stepped in and took this ball away from John Lynch and said, "Forget it, we're cutting Jimmy tomorrow," like that would look awful. That would really, really show a dysfunctional organization. And so I think he is sort of forced into this corner. But I also am glad to hear him say it, because to me, it shows a firm understanding by Jed of what his role is. And you said it. His role is to write the frickin' checks. Write the checks, Jed.
What a great role. I wish I had that role.
Right? I wish I had the funds to be able to write those kind of checks. That's for damn sure. All right, let's transition a little bit because I'm excited about the updates that we got on Deebo and Bosa, or at least the language that was used there. Here we go. John Lynch talking about those two players on the precipice of these big deals coming out. We've had good communication with Tori Dandy, who represents Deebo, and Brian Eirolt, who represents Nick, Lynch said, according to NBC Sports Bay Area. We have a plan for each of those guys. We will keep those discussions private, but like I've long said, those guys are going to be a part of us for a long, long time. They're fantastic players. They are very much at the core of who we are, and they are fabulous players, fabulous people, and a big part of who we are. A little redundant there, John, if I do say so myself. But Randon, do you believe the Niners get either or both of these deals done this offseason?
I would say neither.
Ooh, bold prediction.
Because I look at it as, okay, Deebo had one successful year in this offense. Do we really want to pay a guy $20-something million for one successful year? Granted, it was a great year, but you're looking at maybe they roll the dice on having both Deebo and Nick Bosa try to stay healthy and put together. They're like, okay, we'll pay up for those players if they can put it together another full season. It might be a situation where it gets done midseason. So, 6 or 7 games in, Deebo's balling, he gets an extension. So then he could play the rest of the season with a clean conscience. And they don't have to worry about him testing free agency. But I don't know. It just seems like the Niners are going to want to see them prove it again. I don't like that approach. I think that Nick Bosa is arguably the best, if not a top 5 at his position. And so locking that down before another DN gets a huge contract to help lessen the blow seems ideal. And so, I mean, do you really see them? If he gets injured this season and misses half the games, do you really see him just like them moving on? I don't. I mean, so, signing him to that kind of deal. Deebo's the tricky one because they do have a first-round pick in Ayuk.
Right.
And so is Deebo going to be putting up the same amount of total yardage this season? They went out and got Ray McLeod to probably do some of that gadget stuff early on in the year when the games are, quote unquote, less meaningless or less meaningful, and wait for him to use that in the playoffs, the Russian stuff. So,
right. The wide back stuff.
So maybe the Niners like, okay, well, if our game plan is changing with Deebo Samuel and we're not going to use him as much as a running back, maybe the stats won't be as much this year and he won't get, top 5 wide receiver money. I don't know. I mean, it seems that they might wait, and I don't think that maybe that's the right move to make, but I think it might be something there, because if I was in Deebo's camp and if I was in Bosa's camp, I'd be using the year that they just had to their advantage, and I'd be like, hey, like Christian Kirk got like $22 million, like we should be getting 25 something mil, we should be getting Devontae Adams type money, and so. They're going to use that, and then maybe the Niners don't want to pay that kind of money. It's going to be interesting to see what they use as, arguing points for the dollar amount.
It's going to be very interesting because you could see Deebo in his camp looking at this as their maximum leverage point. They may say to themselves, Deebo just had a career year. What are the odds he has another year like that, back-to-back seasons? Pretty slim, if you ask me, right? It's rare that a player has a career year and then another career year. So you would think his leverage is at the sweet spot. So I anticipate that Deebo and his camp might play hardball, and you could see a situation where if the Niners don't get a deal done, they hold out, and Deebo threatens not to step foot back on the practice field until you get a deal done. So I would think the Niners would be incentivized to get that. Bosa is a little bit trickier for me because I don't necessarily have as good of a feel for what his camp might be saying. His camp might want to lock down that guaranteed money, but to your point of if they wait, that number is only going up. He still has a 5th-year option out there. So his camp might be a little more on the fence as to when that happens. I'm making my prediction now that both deals get done this offseason. You say there's a chance neither one does. Do you see any chance John's completely blowing smoke and one of these two actually gets traded?
No. they're in a win now mode. So I think that they wouldn't trade Deebo Samuel, even though he's on his last year of his deal. And so they would just hope that they can bring him back. And if he tests free agency, then they're going to get a pretty high compensatory pick in return for him. But I think that they have to try to win this year. I wouldn't be so worried about the future that you have to go there. But for Deebo Samuel's camp, you're looking at towards the end of the season, he was used pretty much as a running back, and there was very few 100-yard receiving games when Ayuk started coming on. Other than in the beginning, I think he had a 100-yard receiving game against the Bears, but I can't remember too many towards the end of the season. He was used primarily as a running back, and so
absolutely.
So maybe Deebo Samuel's camp is like, okay, well, Ayuk started heating it up. He's in. I guess him and Trey are boys. They're working in the offseason.
Right.
Not to say that Deebo Samuel's not friends with Trey Lance. But like you said, this could be the pinnacle of our value, and we have to cash in now. And but I also don't think that Deebo is going to play hardball and miss camp. I don't think he's that kind of guy.
He is a hyper competitive individual. You may be on to something there with that. Let's go back to the quarterback position, but just briefly, before we end on something non-quarterback. We got a couple of quarterback topics to go to before then. But was Jimmy's surgery a surprise? There were a couple of comments that to me seemed to indicate that was the case. And that's the vibe I got when John Lynch appeared at the combine. And to me, this is further information that backs up what I felt about it. So here are the comments that I felt were relevant. First, from Kyle Shanahan. The situation is clear, Shanahan said. We were trying to make a move to add some draft picks, and we were pretty close to it. And then Jimmy ended up getting the surgery, which changes things. I think Trey will understand all that. I haven't had to talk to him about it. John says, I would say at the combine, there were real conversations that were pretty far along. But when the shoulder surgery happened, tongue twister there, the health of our players, Jimmy included, is always paramount. And he made a decision for his long term that, along with doctors, he needed that surgery. And so we all blessed that. But that did affect his market. And so right now we hold on to him. I think we're fortunate that we have 3 quarterbacks we believe in, Trey, Jimmy, and Nate. Some people are looking for one. So I think that's a position of strength. When asked directly, was getting a surgery a surprise to you? Lynch says this. I think the plan from everyone, from our docs, from the second opinion doc, was let's try to let rehab fix this. And that was the overwhelming thought, was that it would. And I think when he went back for the next visit, the decision was made that it wasn't improving and that they were going to take that course of action. We spoke to the doctors, and like I said, when we all realized it was deemed to be the best course of action. We blessed it. We supported it. And that's not ideal for any quarterback on their throwing shoulder. But I think getting context that there's no minor surgery when it's your throwing shoulder, but it was relatively minor, and he's going great. I can tell you that. His rehab's going extremely well. I think the prognosis is excellent. What I pick out of all of that is the order of operations, that it sounded as if John Lynch's expectations, after having spoken with Jimmy, his camp, and Jimmy's doctors, was that rehab was probably going to fix the problem, and that it was in going back after Jimmy and his doctors met and decided to have the surgery that then it got thrown onto the 49ers plates. And the interesting thing is him repeatedly saying, oh, we blessed it. We blessed it. Did their blessing really matter at that point? Do you think Jimmy was actually waiting on a blessing from the San Francisco 49ers? Or do you think he got the advice from his doctor and he was like, great, that's what I'm doing because it's in my best interest?
The latter. I think, and even if he got the surgery right after the Cowboys game, he'd still be out for most of this offseason. And so we'd still be in the same situation. The only way that you can kind of hide some sort of, but he'd still have to pass a physical with getting traded. So even if he was going through physical training and he'd still have to pass a physical. And so it's going to be interesting on how this whole thing works out. I don't think that they were prepared for the surgery. And it kind of just blew up there right before he was going to go on stage, like you said, similar to how the Bruce Arians, news cut through this chat. It just like a wildfire for them.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he's getting asked 100 questions about Jimmy G's shoulder. And he's like, I don't even know. I'm just standing here. I just got the news. You just guys got the news. Like, what's going on? And then it makes him look dumb. But ultimately, I do think that it did lower his value, and they're like, okay, well, we already went down this road. We're just going to continue down this road. But I'm more surprised on how high they have Nate Sudfeld in their review, seeing that they have 3 capable quarterbacks and some teams don't have one.
Yeah.
They must seem really high on this kid.
Leaving is with you on that. Believe in Nate and rolling on the floor laughing. Yeah, it's, that seems like they're trying to sell that one on Nate Sudfeld. They're really trying to sell it hard too, with Adam Schefter coming out. Oh, the reason the Niners paid $2 million is multiple teams were interested in Nate Sudfeld. They saw him as a legitimate starter in the league. Really? Legitimate starter? I'm not sure how they got to that conclusion. Darren making me feel better.
Yeah.
Darren coming in. Hey, Peter Schrager had the same problem with the tongue twister on shoulder surgery on Good Morning Football. Well, if Peter Schrager can't get it down, then there's no hope for me. That is a professional right there. And if he's struggling with it, then it makes me feel a little bit better that I couldn't get out the tongue twister. All right. Last quarterback topic before we close this one out. I'm sure we'll be back on the quarterbacks next week. Is there added pressure for Lance in the offseason program because of this? To me, there was always going to be immense pressure and scrutiny on Lance throughout this offseason. But if Jimmy's still on the team, it'll be far more pressure because there's that quote unquote proven commodity on the roster behind Lance. What happens if Lance struggles, which it should be expected that he will at some point because he's a second-year quarterback. It's only reasonable to believe that. Well, Shanahan, his comments related to this said, Jimmy's a good quarterback. So that's not easy for anyone to beat out, and that was tough. Trey wasn't ready to beat him out last year. We'll be definitely closer to that this year if it happens, but it's something that we won't have to worry about until training camp. And usually when you have a situation like that, it makes everyone better anyways. Are you buying what Shanahan is selling right here? Does the competition always make players better, or is there anything to fear from the awkwardness of this situation with Jimmy somehow sitting behind Trey and the added scrutiny?
I think there's maybe a twofold part to this, and the fact that one, he's going to get all the first team reps, so he's going to get a chance to build that relationship with all the starters, even the starters that already have that relationship with Jimmy Garoppolo. According to them, Nate Sudfeld is a legit NFL quarterback, and so he was going to get that pressure regardless. And so you're looking at so Jimmy there is not that big of a deal. No, I think it is. I think there's something to be said about the quarterback owning the locker room and having like it be his room. And there's one thing about having competition, but what's the alternative? Like you traded 3 first-round picks to get this guy. Eventually he has to start, to see what you got. You're not going to you're going to bring in another guy for a competition next season just to push him along. No, if Trey Lance needs another quarterback behind him to push him, then he isn't the quarterback you should have drafted. Like he should have his own motivation to be the best player that he can be, regardless of who's in that locker room.
I agree. To me, there is real human cost to keeping Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster. And at some point in time, and I think it's sooner rather than later. I know the hard line in the sand is week 1 where Jimmy's salary gets guaranteed. But I think that the soft line in the sand needs to be paid attention to. And I think it comes much earlier in these practices, in the team activities as you get into preseason, because that human toll is a very real one. And I think people are mentally fragile at this point in time. I think the vast majority of us over the last couple of years in life have gone through a lot of crap. And that includes athletes. You see them talking about their mental health on a much more regular basis than they used to be. And so I do think that you have to take it somewhat seriously. But I am, not everyone is on that side. Chris Royal, a bit more in the camp of Lance has the personality to simply brush it off. I hope that's true, because that is the type of personality a starting quarterback in the NFL needs to have. This isn't going to be the last piece of adversity that Lance faces as the starting quarterback. And so I would agree that my hope is, if it stays this status quo, he does have the type of personality to block out the noise.
Yeah, I mean, he should have the job. Like, he should have the mindset, like, hey, this is my job. Come and take it. Like, if Jimmy's healthy, he's not going to beat me out. I'm a better quarterback than he is. He's not going to beat me out, healthy or not, shoulder surgery or not. And and he's gonna have to come and take this job, and which is not going to happen. Like, that's the mindset that he should have anyways. And I think he's that type of guy, based on the interviews and that type of thing. He doesn't come off as cocky, but he does come off as confident in his ability to run this team. And so, I think that going into all these different camps and stuff like that, he's going to show it. I mean, even just the clips of him throwing off rolling left and throwing across his body and hitting receivers 40 yards downfield. And we saw it in the Houston game, most air yards by a Niners quarterback in the last 4 years.
Right.
Like, the ability's there. And so, just having that confidence that it's your locker room could bolster what he's already bringing to the table. But I do agree with Chris that he seems to have the mental part down for this game. I thought he handled last season well, with all the questions. I did think that the Niners kind of sheltered him a little bit from the media for most of the season, but he did a good job in all of his interviews. He did a good job after the Houston game answering questions. I think that he's got a good head on his shoulders and is going to take this in stride.
I tend to agree. I am very optimistic on Trey Lance, and I love his personality. He seems to say all the right things. Obviously, we didn't get a great look at him because they limited his media availability, but everything I did see seemed to confirm that he'd be able to handle the rigors of being that quarterback. Like I said, that was the last freaking topic on the quarterbacks. We're getting back to that other ongoing segment that we've been doing, talking about past performance and future value. This time, we're getting down to it. We're down to the last couple of position groups. We are talking about linebackers right now. So we are going to be going through Fred Warner, Azeez Al-Shaair, Dre Greenlaw, Marcel Harris, and Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. And we will be looking at their grades from the 2021 season and the plans for them from the 49ers going forward, whether they are locked in or need to be locked in, need to be traded, whatever the case may be for that particular individual. Let's start with the man who is clearly the leader in the locker room when it comes to the linebacker group, Fred Warner. What type of a grade did you have on Fred Warner's performance in the 2021 season, Randon?
Yeah, I would say he's right around a B+ for me. I think my expectations were super high after that contract. I thought that he was going to blitz more than what he did, that he was saying that they were going to be used and he was going to be used in blitz packages. And so, your grade is measured by expectations. And so with the contract comes expectations. And then with what he was saying that they were going to be using him more to rush the passer as well. And that didn't happen. And he wasn't as good in coverage as he was in the previous season. And so I still think he had a great year based on the expectation that I had for him. I would say B+, but I still think he's one of the best linebackers in football.
I tend to agree. I have him just a little bit higher at an A- there. I saw it as not quite the season that I hoped for. Sorry, I was reading the wrong grade. I agree with you. I have a B+ on him. That's a little teaser of who I might have an A- on coming up next. Not quite the season I had hoped for because of the fact that he was missing those explosive plays. But I thought it was a very solid performance. I had higher expectations for him coming off of getting that huge bag. And because D'Amico Ryans had mentioned potentially rushing the passer more and having more opportunities for those explosive plays. And I think many fans were expecting that as well. And when we didn't have the explosive plays, there was a bit of people believing Fred wasn't having a great season when he was solid in the rest of what he did there within the linebacker unit to me.
Yeah, so we'll see how that works out. I mean, you saw for the Cowboys how Micah Parsons changed that defensive line, and so getting more sacks out of the linebacker position. The next guy we're going to talk about, Al-Shaair, had 2. Warner only had 0.5. He did have 3 fumble recoveries, so he did seem to be around the football all year, which I did like. That's why I thought I gave him a high grade. But the expectation for him to still be one of the elite coverage guys as a linebacker and increase his sack totals based on what my expectations were, it kind of brings that down a little bit, but I still think he's one of the top 5 linebackers in the league.
I like that. And what was your grade on him?
B+.
B+. Nice. So Highbrow came in at an A- there for Fred. And we had Sir Juju, A- for sure on Fred. Allen was coming in with the B++ for Fred Warner, Fred's other cousin who plays sometimes for the San Francisco 49ers. No,
Yeah.
it's a B plus, but that extra plus was for effort, right? It got him there. And Sir Juju says, I give him an A minus, although I'm, in my opinion, he's gotten a little slower. Perhaps it was due to how D'Amico used him. I thought earlier in the season, he didn't look as sure as he normally was within the position, and that maybe that affected him a half a step or so in getting to his assignments. But that as the season progressed, he seemed to be comfortable in his role again and really seemed to return to form there. All right, how did you see Azeez Al-Shaair breaking out? Spoiler alert, this is the one I had the A minus on because the dude is a rising star in my book. But how did you see his season breaking out?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at 102 tackles in 13 games. And so definitely quality. Got 2 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, which looks like it's third best on the team. He had 1 interception, same amount of forced fumbles as Fred. So I'm going to give him an A because the expectations for me was he was the third on the depth chart. He stepped up in a big way and really solidified that defense when Greenlaw went out.
He did. He played phenomenally when he had the green dot on his helmet for that one game. So I think really stepped it up. He's a rising star. He deserved the second round tender that he got. We didn't talk about it with Fred, but he just got locked up last offseason. I don't think the Niners are touching that contract. I think that they're happy with Fred, so he's locked in. Azeez is a different question when it comes to future value for the 49ers. They clearly value him with the second round tender that they placed on him, meaning that he's free to negotiate with another team and negotiate a contract. But if he comes to terms with another team, the Niners have a chance to match that deal. If they choose not to match that deal, the team who made the offer must compensate the 49ers with a second round draft pick. So that shows how much they value him. But it does raise a question of how they commit to him going forward. So because I think that these two are interlocked, because both Azeez and Dre will be free agents at the end of next season, I say we pair those two together and talk about future value at the same time. So let's go through Dre and give him a grade on the season. Clearly, a rough season from an injury standpoint. I'd probably be fair to say it's on some level an incomplete. But with what you saw, what type of grade are you giving Dre on the season?
Yeah, probably. I mean, in the games that he played, he had one really good game, a couple mediocre games. I would say he's probably a C plus for me, maybe a C in the games that he did play. You could probably lower it because the expectation was for him to be there all year long. And so if you want to lower it for injury, I'd have no problem agreeing with you on that. But I would say his play this year was probably C or C plus. Averaging, I think, 7 tackles a game. So not great, but not bad. But he just wasn't on the field.
I agree that not being on the field is the hardest part of this grade. Just in summarizing the grades from the chat on Azeez Harris coming in, Azeez was our best linebacker last year, to be honest. Sir Juju coming in, absolutely agree. An A for sure. Allen concurring, A for me on Azeez. Tassio pointing out, Dre had some major roid rage in that first game back. And honestly, I kind of forgotten that, but I totally agree with that assertion that when he did come back, he saw how hard Azeez had been thumping people, and he came back with a vengeance. Unfortunately, didn't stay on the field for very long. So I would go a little bit higher for Dre in the flashes that I saw. Rough season from an injury standpoint, may have lost that role regardless of the injury to the up-and-comer in Azeez Al-Shaair. Both he and Azeez become free agents next year. So I'm going to give him a grade somewhere in that B minus C plus range for when he was on the field. But here's what I would say about future value for these two, because to me, it's tied together. You have both of these guys coming up to free agency. I expect the Niners to only re-sign one of them. And that means to me that Dre Greenlaw is a prime candidate for a late round pick trade this offseason. I think that the Niners commit to Azeez and trade Dre Greenlaw at some point. That would be what I see as future value. Do you think the Niners go a different route with that one, Randon?
So I think he's the guy that you want to keep is Azeez, but what is the price, right? You have one of the highest paid linebackers in football. You can't pay another one. You can't have 2 linebackers making over $15 million. And so what is the market for Azeez Al-Shaair as far as cash is concerned?
Right.
Is it a $4 or $5 million deal? Is it more than that? What is he going to get on the open market? I mean, is our linebackers as valued as they were a decade ago when they were 250, 260 pounds and they were, Ray Lewis's were around there.
Ray Lewis.
Now they're relied for more in coverage. Some teams, because Azeez is pretty fast, maybe a team that runs a 3-4 and you see him blitz more often for other teams and he could be used in a different way. So it just depends on what they go on there. But as far as value for a team, you can't keep both. And you can't pay Azeez over probably $5 or $6 million a year. So are we going to get priced out on Azeez Al-Shaair because of how good of a season he had? And are we just going to have to kind of, hey, Fred Warner's our number one guy. We're going to replenish this in the draft market every 2 or 3 years and just throw darts and hope these guys can be capable backups. I have a feeling that he ends up walking unless they can sign him to like a 2 or 3 year deal this year for super cheap, which is possible because Al-Shaair might be like, hey, I only flashed one season. Let me get my 3-year deal for $4 or $5 million a year. And then we get elite production from a guy not getting paid very much money, which would be ideal. Or Azeez is like, okay, well, I'm going to be the number 2 guy and I could get number 1 linebacker money on another team if I ball out again this year. The same kind of conundrum that we had with Arden Key.
I tend to agree that there's a chance that the Niners are still working on getting a deal done with Azeez because this is the time to lock him in, just like Jauan Jennings. This is where you can get that value. You take some risk in that, it was just a flash in the pan for Jauan Jennings. It was really the second half of the season in the playoffs. For Azeez, it was a solid entire season, but a single season nonetheless. I think that's worth the risk of trying to lock in those players to those mid-level deals. So I hope that he's on the list for the 49ers, because otherwise I think they do have to go the route you're talking about, where they sort of slap a Band-Aid on it and really count on their ability to develop. And Tassio comes in to say he's got faith in that. We can really develop D-line and linebacker, 2 positions I don't typically worry about too much, like their inability to draft O-line. So he's worried about the O-line, but not so much when it comes to the linebackers. And I think that's fair because we have shown an ability to develop that position group. D'Amico Ryans probably has played a pretty big role in that. Niners Yo doing the good deed. Smash that like button. Yes, your friendly reminder towards the tail end of this show. If you don't currently follow Randon McMahon, the information is down below in the description of this video. Go find and subscribe to his YouTube channel. That's a must.
Yeah.
Just a must. Just a must.
I've been on this show for like 3 months now. Where's the love? I need some subscribers.
Where's the love? All right, then we got 2 left. Marcel Harris, still available in special teams. He gave the team flexibility at the position. To me, I've got to say, as far as future value, I see him a little bit as a redundant skill set, that there are multiple safeties comfortable playing down towards the line of scrimmage for the San Francisco 49ers. I'm not sure they're going to attempt to re-sign him unless it's a minimum deal where he's in competition to make the 53-man roster. And so for a player like that, it's hard for me to give anything than an average grade on the season there. So I've got him in that C+, B- range myself.
D+, C-. I mean, his play wasn't great. I mean, he got beat quite a bit. He's not an elite tackler, and I don't really see that there's spot for him on this roster. I mean, Hufanga can play in the box, and eventually you can't sign everybody, and so he just seems like a guy that, okay, well, he didn't pan out. Let's draft another guy who might. Let's draft another guy who might in the later rounds, and how we already know what he is, and so. Let's draft a 5th, 6th round pick and see if he can outplay the value that Harris gives you. And you continue getting cheaper.
Yeah, I thought when Oren Burks was added to the team as a core special teamer that probably meant you didn't have enough room within that linebacker room for Marcel Harris. So I tend to agree. Not going to be back again unless it's on that minimum deal and he's fighting in camp. And I tend to agree as well that they probably bring in either a late round draft pick or an undrafted free agent to compete in that room as well. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, it does look like he'll be back. I think that he's a core special teams guy for the team. To me, this is much less about what he adds to the linebacker room, although it is solid depth, and much more about what he adds to the special teams unit. great on the season, though. I was pleased again with the special teams contribution. I'm giving him a B+ for me, and I'm glad that he is back. I do think that he's a key piece.
I agree. It's a quality special teamer that is going to have do work for the worst part of our team last year, and so they really focused on it. They brought him back because he can contribute there. And you need those guys. You need to have. Possession is big in football, and having those guys on the roster is huge. I foresee them probably drafting. They probably should draft another linebacker. They took a swing at an undrafted guy out of Ohio State last year that didn't really work out. He was on the practice squad most of the season. I forget his name. So making a 6th-round pick for a linebacker or wouldn't be the worst idea. Have him play special teams and go from there. But I really liked what Finnegan Fowles brought.
Yeah, I do too. There are a couple of other players currently on the roster, but it's not clear whether they'll actually make the active roster for the 49ers, the final 53. Curtis Robinson is on there, and you're probably looking at a practice squad guy there. I agree. I think that you probably bring in some competition to this room.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Because I asked this on Twitter the other day. Because generally linebackers fall in the draft because they're not considered a prime position like D-end or tackle or whatever.
Right. It's like running back. It's been devalued.
Yeah. If linebacker falls to us at 61 and they have a 1st-round grade
on a
linebacker, do they take best player available and then trade one of the guys away? Because
I think no. I think Kyle Shanahan tipped his hand on that in some of his recent comments where he talked about ideal. Yeah, you're looking at best player available. And then he went on to say something interesting where he was like, but because free agency comes before the draft, and I think the question was asked about free agency coming before the draft, and does he wish it went the other way around to where you drafted first and then free agency? He basically said as much. He's like, yeah, you go into free agency and you get those guys that you want, but you can't fill every hole in free agency because you're overpaying for players. So then you go into the draft and you've got 22 boxes up there for your 22 starters, and you may have some open boxes, and that does influence who you take there. So I thought it was a very honest answer by Kyle Shanahan that there are times, and I think this is one of those years, where the Niners have a couple of boxes they need to tick, and it will impact taking best player available, that they may have to go best player available within a select few number of positions.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is just talking about drafting in general. And I follow the LA Kings. If people don't know that, I work for Hockey Royalty, and they talked about their head of scouting, talked about how they view the draft and creating, tiers of players. And so if there's 3 or 4 guys, or say 10 guys within the same tier, and you have a need at one position, you don't have a need at the other one, then sure, go for the need because both players are on the same tier. But if one player is in a higher tier and then you're drafting in a lower tier because of need, that's when you start to screw up your team, because you're not doing what the peak player is, right? If that linebacker right is an all-pro style linebacker and he's cheap for 4 years, then you're benefiting your team in a real way, right? Dallas Cowboys last year didn't have a need at linebacker. They took a 1st-round in Van Der Esch. They had another guy making millions of dollars, but they went BPA and took Parsons, who was highly considered as a top 5 pick until all these quarterbacks went in. And they took him, and he wrecked shop for them all season.
Yeah. Refresh my memory. How did that work out for them, Randon? That was a terrible decision, right? I mean, you should never take best player available.
Yeah, rookie of the year. So, so for me, it's like if they have a 1st-round grade on a linebacker and he drops all the way to 61, go ahead and take him, because then it gives you more. Then you could just get rid of Greenlaw. You don't have to worry about paying him. You can trade him for a 5th or 6th rounder. And then you have 3 dominant linebackers in that room. You also don't have to worry about that 2nd-round pick playing right away because you have Azeez there. You could also shop Azeez for a high pick based on him having over 100-something tackles. And so maybe then you go, hey, we'll shop Azeez for a 3rd-round pick, keep Greenlaw on a cheap deal, and have this rookie guy. So I think if the tier is higher, best player available. I think the only position off the board is obviously quarterback.
Right.
And running back, and maybe, but other than that, I think everything's in play. Well, I guess in special teams at
Randon,
61.
if they take a quarterback at 61, I will lose it. I
Boycotted.
will lose it.
We want competition with 4 guys in camp. We want
Iron
practice squad
sharpens
competition
iron.
and real competition. Yeah.
Yes. Hey, we got a series of chats that I want to bring in here, one after the other. Sir Juju asked a question. Randon, is your channel under your name? I want to go over and subscribe to your channel, bro. And then we had someone come in to do the good deed. Niners Yo coming in to say at Sir Juju, Cerberus Sports is his channel. And just to point out, for those that are not aware, Cerberus is the name of the hellhound, right? The dog with multiple heads on it. And that signifies the idea that Randon on his channel is not purely dedicated to football. It has multiple branches to where he is covering multiple sports. You heard him talk about hockey just a moment ago, also dealing with baseball. It's a phenomenal channel. Anything that you want to do in summing it up for the people so they understand Cerberus Sports, Randon.
Yeah, I just want to talk sports all the time, and whether it be the Niners, whether it be opposing teams. I actually reached out to the long snapper for the Rams. His grandma's friends with my mom, so I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's get him on the pod and talk about some long snapping." It really doesn't matter to me. Like we talk NBA with my 2 friends, Eric and Cam. I'm going Niners tomorrow with Surreal Sunil. Talking A's baseball, Dodgers baseball, just baseball in general. If I feel like it and I'm watching the UFC fight, I might do a UFC one. So it's just kind of just talking sports, having fun. That shop, I spend so much time on the Kings with Hockey Royalty and the Ontario Reign. I have my weekly wonderful show with you, Rob, with Between Two Beards, where I talk Niners quite a bit. So it's kind of like my outlet for all the other teams that I watch and sports I watch, and I'll throw some Niners content in there as well. But yeah, it's just fun for me. And yeah, Cerberus is, we're chomping off fat on every single topic, man.
I love it. And you can be sure there'll be some Niners talk on there when I make an appearance. That's a fact. I just love the niceties that then went back and forth. Sir Juju thanking Niners Yo and Niners Yo kindly acknowledging you are most certainly welcome. I just like the polite nature that was occurring in the chat there, and I absolutely have to call it out. Sir Juju took the time. He says, just subbed to your channel, bro. So you have another one there, Randon. Well deserved. This has been a fantastic show. As I said, if you haven't hit the like button yet, hit it on your way out. Subscribe to this channel, and then go down in the description and find and subscribe to Randon's channel as well. Phenomenal show, as always. Thank you so much for being on with me today, Randon.
It's a pleasure, my man. The beards are back at it again. I like it.
The beards are back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will be back on tomorrow at 5 p.m. with the Sneakerhead call-in show. Tune in then. You know the drill. Until then, cheers, faithful.